Welcome back, Cersei here. So, decided that we're going to be going over some of the redstone creations that I've previously put out on my channel, just to go a little bit more in depth in them, just because there has been a little bit of confusion and wondering on how their actual workings versus and wanting some build tutorials as well. So decided we're going to start off with the 3x3 piston door that I came up with. Now, this is an alternative to the really small 3x3 piston door that is rather widely known on the internet through Minecraft. This door is not my design, but it's very fast opening, but my problem with it was that it required a lever on and off, and also the block to be powering was in the top right-hand corner, which I found very, very awkward. And you would, of course, need an X NOR latch in order to be able to have a lever on both sides, etc., etc. It was kind of just an annoying system. So I decided to come up with my own that was pulse-based, and I think I got a fairly small design here. Honestly, if it weren't for the top block having to be used, it would be much smaller because you could just get rid of the entire top bit. But now, this door can be put in both vertical and horizontal. It works basically the exact same way both ways. I was quite impressed when I figured out that it could work both ways. But we're going to start off with the vertical version because it is much easier to sort of understand the workings of, and therefore it will be easier to show. I'll have timestamps in the description or comment if you want to just skip to the horizontal version and find out the build tutorial, but we're going to start off with the horizontal version. So first off with both of these doors is that they do have a minimal tick delay, which is going to be 2 ticks on a repeater. Any shorter than this and the door will simply not activate when you give it a signal, but being at that exact timing, it will fire every single time in full whenever it operates. Now, this amount of timing is very, very much enough for a player to be able to run across a pressure plate, and honestly, it's actually more than it needs for that. So lots and lots of time there. You don't need to be worried about whether you can sprint over a pressure plate or not for it. Anyway, getting into the build tutorial, easiest spot to start off with is going to be these 2 blocks here. So the door, of course, is 3x3. And yes, again, the advantage of this is that it runs off a pulse rather than a lever, and it operates from the powering block is from the bottom rather than the top. Anyway, starting off on the build tutorial, you've got we're going to start off with these 2 blocks on the back of the 3 pistons. Those are going to be 5 blocks apart, the 3 of the door plus the 2 on the side. So we'll get over here, and we're going to start off with those. We've got 2 blocks that are 5 blocks apart here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to put redstone on top of both of them. Now, I'm going to be going off a little bit off memory with this, so because I have not actually played around with these things in quite some time, but do bear with me for a moment. We're going to start off by getting our pistons in place there, just 3 on each side, along with the top one. Now, of course, this needs to be facing down directly in the center and a block off there. If you want to get this sort of in so that your brain can see exactly how the door is going to look, you can always just place the glass on there right off the top. And getting into the bottom one, so we need to get into the mechanism that actually works the bottom most part of the piston here. And so we are going to get a double piston extender going on down here. So you're going to want 1 piston just underneath the glass on the left hand side, while the 2 pistons directly in the center, offset by 1 block there. And you can just place 2 pieces of glass in there as well. Getting into the actual mechanics of the redstone now, we're going to start off by having these 2 blocks here. These are the most important blocks of the entire build, and we're going to do this just on we're going to start off by doing just the 1 level kind of thing, and then we're going to work on the little bit of redstone that actually has to go on the back here. Of course, this is a 2 wide door. There is a little bit on the back, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, starting off with our activation mechanism, the way this circuit activates is actually by moving a piston, an observer, back and forth between these 2 blocks in order to input 2 different signals in order to sort of tell the door when it's opening and when it's closing. So that is your most important piston there. You need that piston with the observer on it. It will not work otherwise. And your signal can be run into the back of this block any way that you would like. We'll just stick a button on there. Alright, so giving me a minute just to quickly take a look at what I've got going on here. You're going to have a dropper at the bottom of this here, and you're going to want 2 observers going into it, so 1 observer, 2 observers. Ignore that, it was because I used an observer to place it down, but you're going to want 2 observers. They are with the redstone going back that direction and the face on the left going towards the observer in the center. You are going to, I do apologize, in fact this observer is actually looking upwards. So you've got an observer looking upwards with an observer off of it going into the dispenser. On top of this observer, you're going to need an activator rail. This could be other things, but I wanted the activator rail because it doesn't interact with other things around it, which is the reason that it's there. Off of this, you're going to have 2 observers with 1 observer going up and a redstone lamp on top of it, followed by another piece of redstone, another observer going into there. So your whole system should look like this now. You have got the activator rail with sort of a conveyor belt of observers going in a circle like this. Of course, this one with the face towards the redstone lantern and going into that. So now, getting into the back here, we're going to start off with actually our activation mechanism on the middle bit. So we're going to get a block going right there. This block is very important, does need to be solid because it is powering a piston, the piston that's going to be next to it. So don't put a transparent block there, make sure it is a solid block. You're going to have an observer looking upwards into that, of course with the redstone dot on the back of it there. I've just broken my own rule, needs to be a solid block. And we're going to have a piston down here just on the side of the dropper right there. And then right next to it we are going to have a block of anything solid with an observer looking down into it. So let me just place a block to place this on and get that going down there. So the observer needs to be looking upwards and doing that, and then you're going to want an activator rail on this. Again, this can be multiple things, could be a trapdoor, could be multiple things, but the activator rail is specifically good in this situation because it does not interact with the things around it. So, also important note, there needs to be a space here. When your door is open, there needs to be a space here. The observer needs to be up against the block here, and there needs to be a space down at the bottom. Now, getting into the bit that's going to control the side pistons, we're going to have a piston off the side of there and another one off the side on this side. We are then going to actually just directly have observers coming off of where those pistons will extend into. So that's what you're looking at on both sides. It should be identical. With then just another simple observer on top of it in order to carry that signal all the way up. And then the last thing is we need to control this piston up at the top here. So we're just going to have a very simple observer track going off like so into a block. And that should be this entirely completed. So again, when your door is open, now this is very important, when your door is open, this observer needs to be up. It needs to be against the block, not with the piston. All right. If you're noticing that your door isn't working, that is why. So activating this, and it works perfectly. Again, activating that again, and it is going to open back up for us and work fine. It sort of operates in a circular motion, which is why it's not all timed together. Now I'll give you an example of what this looks like when this actually is in the wrong position. So if you happen to mistime the door, if you give it too fast of a pulse, this piston can activate too quickly and the door won't fire, but this piston will be moved down and it'll be left in this state while the door is open. So you'll notice that when I do this, it simply doesn't work properly. So you'll notice that this block has been left here. So in order to, again, fix this, we're going to open it sort of back up, let it do its best to do so. It's going to leave a block in the center. We'll reset that by putting that block there, and just place our observer back up against this block here. And so again, when activated, it's going to work perfectly fine, as long as that block is up. Again, if your door is not being used, if it's open or closed, in fact, this observer needs to be up against the top. Alright, so, moving into the horizontal version. The horizontal version operates off the exact same mechanic, with this piston sort of activating these two separate blocks and the rest of the door operating off that, except it's horizontal. So, it's a little bit of a sprawling mass, It is basically identical. There is one observer added to it right in the center there, but for the most part it's basically the same. So we're going to start off, these blocks are in fact 7 blocks apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks apart. And we're going to get started with our pistons on each side here, and redstone on the tops of the blocks here. We're also going to get our top piston placed in, so by doing that right about there is where it needs to be, and we're going to get our... There's also really no reason why... Oh, there is a reason. I'm entirely wrong. So we're going to continue that off of there. This needs to be an observer right there going into that, so that's what you need to be looking at the top, and redstone coming down followed by a repeater with 2 ticks on it, just as we have over here. Okay, let's get into the bottom mechanism, just to let our brain work a little bit better here so we can envision our door. Let's get the glass placed in. Again, doesn't have to be glass in the center. It can be however you like. I just like using glass because it's easy to see what I'm doing. Anyway, let's get our pistons placed in there, and now we can do this. So now we've got sort of the exact same thing we were looking at in the previous version at the start, and we've got the top placed in, so now let's get the bottom working here. So, most important blocks, again, are these 2 solid blocks that the observer is going to move over here. So, we are going to place those in the exact same place that they were last time, here and here, and get the piston placed up next to it with the observer facing down into it. Of course, with the red dot on the back into those blocks there. Now, just for ease of use, we are also going to use the same area in order to activate our pistons on the side here by placing that in. So this is going to be our activation block right here. If you were to, if you needed to have the signal come in from the side, perhaps on this side of the block, rather than on the back here, you could definitely move this around. It would be as simple as really just pushing this off and sort of, doing something else, like, this or something along those lines. And that way you'd be able to power that block and power this. As long as you power those 2 at the same time, everything would work the exact same. However, for simplicity's sake, we're going to stick to the same design, and we are going to leave it like that, assuming that you need to get the power into this block right there. So once again, we're going to place some sort of a button or something on this so that we can activate it, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. Now, in this case, we are using trapdoors instead of activator rails. Again, as I did say, there can be multiple things used in the case of activator rails, as long as they activate fast enough in between so they don't trigger 2 observer ticks. But in this case, because activator rails can't be placed on their side, we're using these things, trapdoors. You could also honestly replace these with not trapdoors if you wanted to, activator rails, if you just place the blocks underneath them. Anyway, shouldn't matter. Here we are. We've got the trapdoor. We're going to place one of them on the side of this block right there and one of them on the bottom of this block right there, and we're going to go off that. So starting off with our main sort of level here and not bothering with the level underneath just yet, we are going to have the same sort of thing where we have an observer coming off this right here, going over and into a dropper. Now, it does not matter which direction this dropper is. Oop. It could be up, it could be down, it could be sideways, it does not matter. So that it's visible, I'll put it sideways. Anyway, getting back to our observers, we're going to continue to have that line come around, go up into a redstone lamp, and then off into the side of that piston. Now, there is one important note that you have to have with this. Because of the horizontal design, there is actually one other thing required, and as I mentioned earlier, that is this middle observer right there. So you have to have this observer so that its back is facing into the piston in the center there, just like so. So that should be what you're looking at here at this point. And so now we can move into the, actually we'll take care of these this side piston real swift. Right here we'll just get this piston placed like so, and an observer placed in the opposite way here, just like that. So it's going to be looking at where that piston is going to extend and facing into the line going up. So now we can get into the little bit that is underneath. Yet again, it's going to be very important where this observer's placement is. It cannot be against the piston, it needs to be against the block. But let's get the block placed in first. So you're going to be looking at these two pistons here. Again, this is sort of right here. You're going to be looking at those two pistons, part of the double piston extender. You're going to place a block right underneath that and get your observer, looking into it there, again with the red dot pointed in this. Again, this needs to be a solid block, cannot be transparent or it will not work. And get your piston there right up against that dropper once again. And so there should be very little other that we have to do here, really just placing in the one observer and one block. So if we place one block right there, right next to our piston that we have, and we're going to place an observer off the back of this trap door here, so it's going to be looking at the trap door and with the redstone output into that block back there. And I believe with that, that should complete this. Again, really important that this observer is against this block and not against the piston. Make sure that is how that is. However, if we press this button right now, we should have a fully functioning door, just as I said. And once again, there we are. It's perfect. It moves. It's not the fastest door in the world, but it's pretty fast. You can sort of sprint through it. And it works off pulses, so you don't have to worry about XNOR gates. Anyway, that's going to be that. Those are the two doors there. This, by the way, does follow the exact same rule. It does need a specific amount of pulse. I've messed this placement up 3 times, okay? If you have a repeater, a pulse that is less than this amount, you have to have a repeater. If the repeater is this much, it will not work. If you have a short pulse, that is like an observer pulse, which is a 1-tick pulse, you need to make that pulse lengthier with some sort of a repeater. So this is the shortest that it can possibly be, otherwise it will not work. You'll notice if I place some sort of something there and destroy it, it will be working perfectly fine. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this. That is the vertical and horizontal piston door that is pulsable. And I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.